what we have seen yesterday, and what we would like to do. We would like first to rewrite the Navier-Stokes system as a control system, so we have to take into account the boundary condition. To study the stabilizability for the linearized model, and to see how we can find a feedback control able to stabilize the nonlinear system. Okay, so I recall for people who were not there some details about what we have seen. So we have some WS stationary solution, and we look for control taking into account the difference between the state and the stationary solution able to stabilize. Okay, there is a long series of paper about that. I've just mentioned some names, but I should say that these results are obtained for regular domain and not domain with corners, and in the case of Dirichlet condition. There are also groups, mainly in Germany, working in numerical algorithm for computing feedback solution. Okay, so the problem we have in mind, one possible configuration is this one. So I recall that we have an inflow boundary condition here corresponding to given data here, US, we take a parabolic profile, so only an horizontal velocity, the vertical velocity is equal to 0. We take here and here Dirichlet, homogeneous Dirichlet condition, some control located on the cylinder, on a small slot here, corresponding to some Dirichlet condition, plus an Neumann condition outside. Okay, I have already explained this. So the stationary solution is this one. We see that the US enter into the equation in the boundary condition. And since we look for a control stabilizing the difference between W and WS, we are going to write the equation for W minus WS, which is denoted by Z. And we also write the difference of the pressure for W and the pressure for WS. So this is our system. So in this system, you recognize the linear part of the equation and the nonlinear term. And the goal is to find U, depending on Z, able to stabilize both the linearized and the nonlinear system. So what we have seen that for some finite dimensional system, for the inverted pendulum, we get an equation like that. While in the case of Navier-Stokes, we have to take into account the Leray projector, and because pi z is different from z, we have an equation for pi z, the projection, and another one for I, the identity, minus pi z. And I would like to explain how we can get this. I don't know if it is written there, but I can give the details on the blackboard. So okay. So I start with the equation dz over dt minus nu Laplace z plus the convection here plus the nonlinear term, but I will add the nonlinear term after. So plus the pressure equal to 0, and the divergence of Z is also equal to 0, and I have some boundary condition which are the first one is a non-homogeneous Dirichlet boundary condition on the disk, and the second one is a Neumann condition at the exit of the channel. So, as for the heat or for the Burger equation, what we would like to do, we would like to use the what is called the Stokes or Ossin semigroup. Ossin is for the linearized Navier-Stokes equation. But we cannot use the corresponding semigroup for Z because Z does not satisfy the condition Z dot n equal to 0. This is different from 0 on gamma D. And we know that the Stokes or the Ossin semigroup is a semigroup for functions which satisfy the divergence of Z equal to 0, which is satisfied, but this is not 0. And this is why we have to decompose the solution into two parts. It's the same for the heat equation. When you consider the heat equation with Dirichlet boundary condition, if you want to use the heat semigroup, you must have a boundary condition which is 0. Okay. So I have first to solve the equation for W, taking into account the boundary condition. So I look for Z in the form W plus Y. So I would like to solve the stationary equation for W. So the stationary equation for W is this one. Plus some pressure equal to 0. The divergence of W will be 0. And I have to take into account the fact that W will satisfy the non-homogeneous Dirichlet condition on gamma D plus some Neumann condition on gamma N. I write it in this form because it is shorter, but okay, so this is on gamma N. Okay, so the only unknown is, or the only data, non-null data, is mu. But this equation has not necessarily a solution because this operator here, without the convective term, is invertible. It means that we can solve the corresponding elliptic equation by using Lax-Milgram lemma. But this one is not. So I have to transform the equation just by choosing a lambda naught for which this operator is invertible. And I have explained yesterday that finally, when we put all the things together, the operator B that we found does not depend on lambda naught. I would like to explain this in more details, but first, I have to say...
is actually a function of t also, right?
Yes. So U depends on T.
They also depend.
And so, okay, but the equation is solved for every t, okay? It's a time-dependent equation, but I just take the elliptic form of the equation. Okay, so first a question for student. Can you use the Lax-Milgram theorem for solving this type of equation? I just take the Laplace operator. I take minus Laplace W equal to 0 in a bounded domain omega. Only with Dirichlet condition everywhere, or you can have mixed condition, it's not the problem. And you take W equal to some U on the boundary. How do you prove the existence of solution, and how do you study this type of equation? Who can answer? Who knows has some ideas? You have? But I hope you are not the only one. You have already seen this type of problem or not? Yes? How do you do? You use Lax-Milgram, but...
Display should be made.
Sorry?
Condition should be 0.
Yeah. So to use Lax-Milgram, you need that the boundary condition is equal to 0. So how do you solve the problem corresponding to a boundary condition which is not 0? So there are...
Finite approximation.
Sorry? Approximation, but even if you use an approximation, you will have some non-homogeneous data at the boundary.
Some replacement so that the boundary becomes 0.
Yeah. So the idea is to say, okay, I'm not able to solve this problem, but I can find some function. I know that if I take not W, but let's say, I don't know, V. So if V is in H1, the value at V on the boundary, so the trace, is in some space H1/2 of gamma. And what is important is that this operator is a surjective operator. So there exists a lifting operator, I can say L, a continuous lifting operator, in such a way that if you take some value at the boundary, you can find a function depending on G in H1 and depending continuously on G. This is very important. So you decompose here the solution, W, in the form Vg plus another function, which will be, I need some, let us say, W tilde. Now, if I write the equation for W tilde, I have to write this. So now this is no longer 0. I take the Laplace operator of this. So I put this on the other side. And so I have Laplace of Vg. But now the gain is that W tilde is 0 on the boundary. And I can solve this problem here by using Lax-Milgram lemma, because the term which is here can be interpreted in a variational formulation. I take phi as function test. I can write this in the form integral over omega of minus grad Vg times grad phi, and this is a linear functional over H1 naught, because I can write the following majorization. I can write here the H1 norm of VG times the H1 norm of phi. Phi here and W tilde belongs to H1 naught. And this also depends continuously because I take the lifting here on G. Okay, so I can solve. I can solve this problem using the property that the trace operator is surjective. Next, I can transform like that, and I can solve the equation. Now, if you modify the initial equation in such a way that you lose some ellipticity property, let us say you take something depending on the problem is that with Dirichlet, only Dirichlet condition, it will be elliptic. But let us take some A W with A not necessarily 0, because here I have this term but also this one. So depending on the sign of A, this operator is no longer elliptic. So when I want to solve the equation here, plus AW and minus A VG, I cannot necessarily use the Lax-Milgram lemma for this equation because this operator is not necessarily coercive. And because of that, I have to modify the equation here. I have to take lambda naught large enough in order to control the A, and I put here lambda naught W. So like that, I obtain an equation which can be solved. And it's the same here. What I have to do, I have to take first a lifting operator. Next, I have to solve the corresponding Stokes equation with homogeneous Dirichlet boundary condition. And finally, I have to take the sum. Okay, now let us understand why the solution here when, if you remember well, yesterday I have introduced the operator B being the Laplace operator denoted by A with the corresponding boundary condition, or this type of operator. And I have added lambda naught I, and here I have introduced the operator D corresponding, D is the operator which associate the non-homogeneous data, the G, with the solution WG. This is the operator D that I obtained by solving first by lifting the trace, and next by solving this type of equation. So what I say that this operator here does not depend on lambda naught. Okay. I do not want to give all the details, but what I do the following. I take BG here, and here this is the WG. So WG is the sum of two terms, W tilde, which depends on G, plus VG. And W tilde G is the inverse of this operator applied to that quantity. So I see that sorry. Okay, so when I decompose this like that, of course, this is not completely, what I write is not, it's a little bit formal. Okay, so it's a little bit formal because I see that this part will not depend on lambda naught. But of course, this one will depend. But finally, it can be shown that it is independent of lambda naught. More or less, it's the ID behind. Okay, so we see that when we just use the weak formulation of the equation. So this is one way for solving this type of equation. Okay, now I have another question that I would like to answer. So assume that you have understood why it does not depend on lambda naught. There is a very crucial assumption here. It is the fact that I take G in H1/2. So I need some regularity on G to solve a problem like that. Now, I would like to say a few words about the case when G is in L2. So when G is in L2 of gamma, I can still solve the problem. I take the simplest one, but it can be done for another one. So I would like to solve this equation, but now with G in L2. So I cannot use that method. Okay, but I say, okay, I try to find a weak formulation for this problem. So I start and I make an integration by part with some test function phi. Okay, I make a first integration by part. So what I have here, a boundary term. Okay, this is a little bit formal because the W is not necessarily regular enough in order to justify this green formula. But assume this is true. Assume that U is regular. Not very regular, but like that. Okay? So the first trouble is that first U does not appear here, and the second trouble is that I have dW over dn, and I know that W will not be too regular, so I have to assume that I take function phi for which the trace at the boundary is 0. But I have to continue here. I have to make another integration by part, and I have to write here W times minus Laplace phi plus the boundary term. And the boundary term now is the value of W at the boundary, so it's U, and d phi over dn. Okay. And now, now I have an equation, a variational formulation for W. I say that W some function W in L2 is a very weak solution of the star equation.
U is G.
Yeah, sorry. U is G. You're right. U is G. So it's better to... Thanks. So W is a solution of this equation, a very weak solution, if and only if it satisfies the following weak formulation. What is the weak formulation? The weak formulation is the integral of omega of W minus Laplace phi plus G d phi over dn is equal to 0, and I have to specify the set in which I take phi. So assume that I take phi. I take phi in H2. I assume that the boundary of omega is regular. Enter H1 naught of omega. So I say that this equation, this very weak formulation, admits a unique solution. How I can prove that? I just remark that so I have to introduce some operator I denoted by lambda. I introduce the operator lambda, which associate d phi over dn with this term here. So, but I have to replace this by something. So I say for NEF in L2, I compute the solution of this equation. So for NEF in L2, now I have a classical elliptic equation. I can solve this equation. I can use elliptic regularity result. I know that the solution phi is in H2 enter H1 naught. And so this operator is well defined. And if I have such a regularity here, This operator is continuous from L2 of omega into H1 half of gamma, or even a weaker result, let us say, in L2. So I have an operator which is lambda, which is a continuous operator from L2 of omega into L2 of gamma. And I say that the variational formulation here is nothing else than the integral over omega of W times F plus G times lambda F equal to 0. And I rewrite the equation like that. And this is nothing else than writing G lambda F L2 of gamma equal to F lambda star G in L2 of omega. I can, so I have a linear continuous operator. I can compute that joint. And so I transpose the operator here, and I have an inner product in L2. And saying that this identity is satisfied for every F means that necessarily W is uniquely defined by W is equal to minus lambda star G. This is known as the transposition method. This is very important tool in studying many problems, especially partial differential equation. It's a kind of duality method which is very powerful and very useful to study problem with data which are not regular enough in order to define the equation. So it means that the way I construct the solution in the case when the value at the boundary is in H1 half can be extended in a continuous way to the case when G is in L2. So the solution corresponding to this and this is the same for regular function. The way of construction is not necessarily the same, but the solution is the same one. So, okay, I hope this will be a little bit helpful to understand what we do. And okay, sorry. I do not know why. Mm-hmm.
So basically, you take very weak solutions.
Yeah. It's called very weak solution, or solution in the sense of transposition.
Right. You can also put G to be a Fisher.
Yeah, it's
the same.
Exactly. This is very interesting to notice that. Okay, I assume, very interesting question. I can a few words. I assume now you want to solve this equation. Okay. Okay, I assume that you are interested in solving the classical Laplace equation. with Dirichlet condition as the boundary. And you take, okay, F in L2, you use Lax-Milgram. So the question is, can you use Lax-Milgram when F is in LP? And for which P? And okay, so you have to ask the question, can you say that when F is in LP, F is necessarily in H minus 1, the dual of H1 naught? Can we say something like that? So if it is true by duality, we have to check that H1 naught is continuously embedded in LP prime, the dual of LP. And so it depends on the dimension. So in dimension n greater than 2, you know that H1 naught when omega is bounded is continuously embedded in any LP when P is less than the Sobolev L2 star, the Sobolev exponent, or 2 star is NP divided by N minus P. So it means that, for example, in dimension 3, you have N equal to 3, P equal to 2, sorry, we are in the case 2. So P equal to 2, so 2 star is equal to 6. And so this is true for the conjugate, so for P greater or equal than 6/5. So up to L 6/5, you can use the Lax-Milgram lemma. But if you take P equal to 1, this is no longer true. So for L1 data, this is not true. For a measure, this is not true too. And so if you want to, for example, to find the, to prove that there exists a green function for your elliptic operator, you have to take some delta function at some point xi inside your domain. This is the solution to your corresponding to the green function at some at the value xi. And you cannot prove the existence of a green function by using Lax-Milgram lemma. So what you need, you have to work to use the duality argument. And the duality argument can be used if you are able to prove a regularity result for data. But it's exactly the same construction. Okay, so we have to come back now to Navier-Stokes. So we already, I don't know why. Okay, it is on the screen. It takes some time, or I don't know. Because it is on that screen. Okay. Otherwise, I can switch, but if I switch to... Okay. So I've recalled here the decomposition corresponding to a mixed boundary condition. We have seen that yesterday. I can go ahead, and we have defined the corresponding Helmholtz projector and the corresponding domain of operator. Okay. Okay. So we are in this nice situation. So now what we do. So we want to take into account this homogeneous boundary condition. So due to the convective term here, we have to introduce this lambda naught. We have to solve this equation exactly as in the case of the Laplace equation, but now we have to replace the Laplace equation by the Stokes or the linearized Navier-Stokes equation for the corresponding stationary solution. And the equation for y is that one, and I have to put here the term coming from W. But now the gain is that I have homogeneous data at the boundary. And so for y, I can use the Duhamel formula. I can write the equation in this form. Of course, if I want to use the Duhamel formula, I have to eliminate the pressure first, and I have to take the projection of all this quantity. It's why I write things like that. But the computation is exactly the same as for the heat equation, except that now I have the projector operator here, projection operator. So I use the Duhamel formula, and I make the integration by part in time exactly as before. But I can now, so I obtain, making integration by part, I obtain minus A applied to this term, and I add this term by putting it here, and the sign is correct. So I have this new operator now, and I have two terms. The term for two boundary terms, the term for t is there, and the term for t equal to tau equal to 0 cancel this one. So the equation is that one, and so I have to add these two terms. But contrarily to the case of Berger or the heat equation, this term is not equal to z. Why it is not equal to z? Because of the boundary condition, this condition, which is not satisfied here. It is not equal to pi z, but to z, but it is equal to pi z. So this is an equation for pi z, but I write in this form, which is a little bit formal, but which can be justified in two ways, which are completely equivalent. One way consists in saying, okay, I have a semi-group on the Stokes space L2 function with divergence-free condition plus condition at the boundary. I can use an extension of the semi-group. This is the first way for defining correctly the equation. The second way consists in using the transposition method. The duality method we have seen for the elliptic equation. This method can be used in the same way. Okay, so now I have an equation for pi z, and what is the equation for the other part? It's very simple, but it has to be explained. So I start from z equal to w plus y. Now I decompose z into pi z plus I minus pi z. So I know the equation for pi z, it's an evolution equation, and the question is, what is the equation for I minus pi? I have just to take I minus pi z and to write that it is I minus pi z w plus I minus pi y. But y belongs to the Stokes space. So y is equal to pi y. And so this term is 0. and it's why I have just this identity, and W is the function denoted by mu if I have mu on the boundary. And this is exactly what is written here. So now we have a coupled system, not coupled, but a system, one equation for pi z, which is an evolution equation, and another equation, which is a quasi-stationary. It's an equation depending on t, but you integrate this equation for each t. And taking here the Dirichlet operator applied to mu or applied to the normal component of mu is the same, because when you can decompose this into the normal component and the tangential component, and in the tangential component, the part corresponding to I minus pi is 0. So it's just a remark. And so now, okay. Now what we have, okay, we have finished, nearly finished, all the difficulty. Now we are going to go through the easy part. Not necessarily easy, but you are going to see that it is easy. So, we have a nice system, little bit complicated, but okay. It's like in finite dimension, and I would like to use tools from finite dimensional system. It was not obvious at the beginning because, okay, the first idea for people working in this domain was to say, okay, we would like to study the stabilizability of Navier-Stokes equation or linearized Navier-Stokes equation by either by interior control or boundary control. It was not obvious to see that we can use the same tools as in finite dimension. And so we have used tools from controllability theory. So we have used null controllability result for the linearized Navier-Stokes equation, which is very powerful and strong tool. So if you are able to drive the solution to 0, of course you can stabilize it. Another way in the direction of looking at a finite dimensional system has been done by, in particular by Fursikov and Barbu and Trigiani. They have shown stabilizability by looking at the linear independence of basis corresponding to the generalized eigenvalue of A star. And we are going to see that it is enough to look at not necessarily to all the generalized eigenfunction, but only the eigenfunction of A star. And this is the result which is mentioned here. So the idea is to say, to stabilize the linearized Navier-Stokes equation for some decay rate minus omega, it is sufficient to stabilize the system that we obtain by projecting the equation onto the unstable system. So if we agree with that, after that, we have to look at the stabilizability for the projected system. And the stabilizability for the projected system is equivalent to the linear independence of the image by B star of the basis of eigenfunction. This is exactly what we have seen for finite dimension, and it is true even in that case. And this idea goes back to work in the 60s and 70s by Fattorini, Trigiani also published paper on that. And more recently, Badra and Takahashi have noticed that this is true also for in the case of Navier-Stokes, which was not completely clear for everybody at that time. Okay, so the precise theorem is the following one. Assume that you have some the generator of a semi-group, and not necessarily Navier-Stokes. We need two assumptions. One is that the semi-group is analytic. So we have explained yesterday that the analyticity corresponds to have the spectrum, yes, in some sector. So this is the first assumption. The second one is that the resolvent of A is compact. So this is true for Navier-Stokes, Breed equation, Burgers, and linearized Navier-Stokes. And the assumption on B, of course, we have an operator which is not bounded from U into Z. It is bounded from U into the dual of the domain of A star. Okay, this is not enough. We need a little bit more, which can be expressed by using tools introduced by Professor Sritaran yesterday, and using the fractional power of this operator. So I explained the trick between this. So here, alpha, the parameter alpha is between 0 and 1. It means that alpha minus 1 is negative. So I take here, so either negative fractional power or the inverse of a positive. So it means that when I apply here lambda naught minus A to the power minus 1, I recover the Stokes space that I have denoted by Z. Okay, I recover the Stokes space. So it means that, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just say, okay. You know that you start from D of A, Z, and D of A star prime. You know that this operator here is unbounded in Z, but it is an isomorphism from the domain of A into Z. And its inverse is like that. So if we extend this operator using some duality argument, it can be shown that the extension is a bijection between Z and the dual of this domain here. So it's why when you take the inverse, you start from this space into that one. And what is written here, you take not necessarily such a smoothing operator, but something which is between 0 and minus 1. So you arrive at some space which is an intermediate space between D of A star and Z. So it means that B is not completely totally unbounded in the sense that it is a little bit more regular than being from U into the dual of A star. So, and this assumption is satisfied for the Dirichlet condition. So I am in this situation, and now what I have a finite number of eigenvalue for which the real part is greater than minus omega. And what I denote the unstable space correspond to the sum of all the generalized eigen space corresponding to this eigenvalue. And because there is there are a finite number of such eigenvalues, and the corresponding generalized eigenspace are of finite dimension, the sum of all this space is of finite dimension. Okay, now the stabilizability condition is the following one. This pair is stabilizable if and only if for each eigenvalue corresponding to this family, so for each j here, I have to look at this following family, and where the phi jk, when k varies between 1 and Lj, which is the geometric multiplicity of lambda j, this is the basis of the eigenspace, not the generalized eigenspace. So I have to look at this, to look at that family, and to prove that this family is linearly independent. And this is exactly equivalent to showing that if you have for some lambda, one of the lambda j I want to study, an eigenvector, I have to show that if the B star of this eigenvector is 0, necessarily the solution to this problem is phi equal to 0. Of course, I have to say what is the B star. So the B star of phi can be computed by using the Green formula. And trust me, but the B star is something like the normal derivative of phi minus psi, the pressure associated with phi, times n, plus the term coming from the convective part. So this is the condition B star phi equal to 0. And so what we have to look at, we have to look at the following system. So I can write something now. So I am in the following situation. Okay, what I have corner here, plus some junction between Dirichlet and Neumann. So if I would like to use the previous tool using global Kalman inequality, I cannot do that for two reasons. So global Kalman inequality, I can explain it's a kind of weighted energy inequality, giving some nice property to study the null controllability or controllability problem. So, but in that case, what I need that gamma is C2 or C3, and I need only to have only Dirichlet condition. So I cannot use this. Okay, what I use here, I use the fact that I have some eigenvalue problem inside the domain. So this is the equation. Some boundary condition. Here, I do not specify the boundary condition here. And here, phi is 0. And on this part of the cylinder, or even on the control part, which is something there, I know that this normal derivative here, it's a kind of Neumann condition, is 0. So I completely forget what happened elsewhere. I just look in this part, and I make a zoom here, and I just use the fact that the boundary where I put the control is regular. And on this part, what I know that here I have a eigenvalue problem, so an equation corresponding to an eigenvalue problem. And on this side, I have phi equal to 0 plus some Neumann condition. And the Neumann condition which is given there is exactly the one corresponding to this operator. So it means that using these two conditions, I can extend the equation on the other side of the cylinder, and I can say, okay, I extend the equation by taking here phi equal to 0. And because I have the right junction condition between this part of the domain and the other part, the equation, the full equation, is still valid in the extended domain. So now, what I have this equation here, which is valid not only in omega, but in omega plus this extension. And in the extended domain, I have extended both the phi and the pressure. The pressure is equal to 0 psi, and phi is also equal to 0. And what I would like to know, if this is sufficient to say that phi and psi are 0 everywhere. It's true, but contrarily to the case of the heat equation where we can use the Holmgren uniqueness theorem, the proof here is a little bit more complicated, and it's due to Fabre and Lebeau in the 90s, 96, their first result. So they prove such a result, and using that, we obtain the stabilizability condition we need. So now, we are in the situation where we know that we have a system which is stabilizable, and we would like to see how to choose the feedback. So I recall what we have seen yesterday for linearized Burger equation. So we are in this situation. We decompose the space Z into the stable part plus the unstable one. I use omega to say that this also depends on the shift I take here minus omega. And what is nice is the fact that the unstable space here is a finite sum of space of finite dimension. I take here the generalized eigenspace, the real generalized eigenspace that I have introduced yesterday. I just mentioned this when okay, think that Z is equal to L2. So it's usual to say to identify Z and Z prime in that case, or Z star. But even if we identify Z and Z star, we can decompose Z and Z star in a different way, in the sense that we can use here the generalized eigenspace for A, and for Z star, it is very useful to introduce the generalized eigenspace, not for A, but for A star. So we obtain two different decomposition and the corresponding projector. And we need that in the computation. Because for the computation, what we need the fact that for the unstable part of A and for the unstable part of A star, there exist two different bases, one for ZU and the other one for Z star U, which satisfy the following B orthogonality condition. This is essential, and thanks to that, we can define the projector corresponding to the previous decomposition. So, contrary to the case when we have a symmetric operator, in the case of the symmetric operator, using this type of projector, it means that we have exactly the same family here. So the difference here is that we have two types of different family. This is very important because, as I explained at the beginning, we are also interested in numerics for this type of problem. And so when you do numerics, you make some approximation. So here, what we do the following. So we have a continuous model and the discrete approximate model. What I'm going to explain is how we can construct the feedback for the continuous model. And I have to explain how I can do the same for the discrete model, and can I have some trust about is it correct or not, or is it accurate enough? And the idea is to say, okay, what I need a very precise approximation of what? Of this basis. It means that I have to calculate very accurately this function, this eigenvalue, and the corresponding eigenfunction. Of course, I can do that only for a few numbers, but we are going to see that a few number of unstable eigenvalue is enough to stabilize the Navier-Stokes equation in the situation we are looking at. So the approximation level is only to approximate this function and the corresponding eigenvalue. So now, as I have explained yesterday, if I know this projector, I can also define the corresponding projection of BU, which is not an element in L2 or in Z. It is an element in that space, but using some transposition, I can do that. So this can be done exactly as before. So now I just say a few words about the stabilizability. So we know that stabilizing this system is exactly, so this is the definition of open loop stabilizability. It means that I say that the pair here is stabilizable or satisfy the finite cost condition in Z with control in U if for any initial condition there exists a control for which the solution corresponding to this equation belongs to L2 in time with values in Z. But this condition is equivalent to the stabilizability of this pair or the finite cost condition, but also when I replace the space U, which is an infinite dimensional space, by a space of finite dimension, which is generated here by the real part and the imaginary part of the image of B star of the eigenspace, corresponding eigenspace for A star. And the last result is the one I need. I need the fact that the stabilizability for this pair is equivalent to the stabilizability of the projection. And this is what is written here. And as I have explained in the previous talk, I can use the extended Gramian associated with the projected operator here in order to construct a feedback and to solve, to find the feedback. I do not compute this and take the inverse after. I solve a Riccati equation of small dimension. This is the tools I need, and I have already explained. So now the situation is the following. So okay, so the picture is as follows. We start with the Navier-Stokes equation. First, we linearize. Next, we have seen that to have some exponential decay, it is enough to look at the projected system. So we project onto a finite dimensional system the linearized Navier-Stokes equation. And we find the feedback here, able to stabilize the projected system. And we have seen that, or we are going to see, we have seen that it is enough for stabilizing the linearized Navier-Stokes equation. But we would like to look at what we can do for the full nonlinear system. So this is one way. So another method consists in using not necessarily this machinery, consisting in projecting and taking a very special Riccati equation with ER0, but looking at the construction of a feedback by solving an optimal control problem with an infinite time horizon. So the trick consists in choosing some nice observation operator here, which can be defined on, okay, it depends here. C is continuous from some space Z into Y. But now I can change the space Z is not necessarily L2, I can choose something else. Okay. I'm going to give some examples. And okay, I introduce the value function of the problem. The value function corresponds of the value when I minimize for some given initial data. And it can be shown that the value function is expressed in terms of some my notation is here is not sorry. There is a mistake here. Okay, this is correct, but not this here. Here I have to put the operator P here, which is the solution to some Riccati equation. So I summarize. Now I look for a minimum for a solution to this problem. I assume that I can show the solution exists. So in that case, the optimal control U is characterized by this feedback formulation, where the P now solves a Riccati equation of the same type as before, but now I have to take into account that I have this new term, and it's why I introduce here the operator C star C. So what is wrong here? It's a P and not pi. Okay? So this is the classical tool for solving a linear problem. And okay, now the question is, we have to find a control U to solve the nonlinear system. And the question is, how to choose K in such a way that when I put this feedback in the equation, I still stabilize the nonlinear system. So this is the nonlinear part of the system. I know, or I assume that I choose K in such a way that the linear part here is stabilized, but I do not know if when I add this part, I still obtain something nice. Okay, so the idea is to say, okay, I have a family of problems here, and for each operator C, so for each cost functional of this type, I obtain some P which depend on C and for which give the value function of the problem. It is associated to some Riccati equation. And so to this P, I associate the K. So the K depends on C. And the question is how I can choose the C in order that when I choose the corresponding K in the equation, I still stabilize the nonlinear system. So what I have to check is the following. Assume that I choose some K. So now I have a nonlinear system in feedback form. And I would like to know in which space I can solve the corresponding nonlinear equation. So I denote by S here the space of solution for Z. And I look at the following question. So I have to say, okay, assume that Z is in S. What can I say about the nonlinear term here? So the nonlinear term is in another space, an abstract space. Let us say F. Okay? And I would like to, okay, this is not correct like that. I would like to say, okay, if Z is in S, I would like to have this type of bound, but here it's the right-hand side depends nonlinearly on Z. So for the Navier-Stokes equation, it should be Z, the norm of Z squared, the square of Z of the norm of Z. Sorry, the square is missing here. Okay, so. So this is the first question, and the second one now, I consider the nonlinear system as a linear one with a non-homogeneous term here. So the small f play the role of the nonlinear system, of the nonlinearity of the system. And so I have to study this linear equation, and for this linear equation, what I need this kind of estimate. I cannot do better than that. So I summarize. Now I assume that I have a nice space, S. Knowing that Z is in S, I would like to know in which space if it belong F of Z. It is in some space F. And now I look at the equation satisfied by Z. So this equation, this one plus the other one. And of course, if I replace here the nonlinearity by some f, I must know this type of estimate. Otherwise, I cannot say that my nonlinear system is well posed. I do not say that it is enough, but I must have at least this. So now I have three things to find together. I have to find the correct space, and the choice for S and for F, the corresponding space, is not unique. So I have to find S, F, and C in such a way that everything is well posed. And there are different strategies to do that. So one strategy can name high gain functional. So Professor Sritaran yesterday speak about that by introducing some fractional power of the operator minus A. So the idea of eigenfunctional is to try to adapt what is known for the feedback stabilization of a nonlinear system in finite dimension to the infinite dimension one. So it consists in choosing C strong enough in the sense that the value function strong enough in the sense that this will give you some strong norm. For example, assume that okay. So the possible choice for C, take to simplify Z equal to L2 or Y equal to L2, and take C equal to the identity. So if you take the identity here, it means that you control the solution in L2. So this is not a strong norm. So if you need a stronger norm, you can take C equal to the gradient of Z or some fractional power of A with some shift if it is needed. So in that case, you control the H1 norm. But you can take something stronger. You can take minus A to the power 3, 4. In that case, you will control this norm. Okay, so you have a different choice for C. And so you have a norm which may vary here. And you can increase the C. And so this strategy corresponding to eigenfunctional has been used and introduced in several papers. I just mentioned some of them here by Barbu, Lasieka, and Trigiani around 2006. There is also a previous paper by Barbu in 2003. So in dimension 2 and 3, they choose something stronger than 3, 4 plus epsilon. The problem is that in the case of boundary control, in that case, the operator P corresponding to the value function of the problem exists, but it is an unbounded operator, and it does not satisfy a classical Riccati equation, and this is why this strategy seems to be complicated, at least for the numerics. And a completely opposite strategy consists in introducing low gain. So it means that we can take C weak. So one choice corresponds to the case when C is equal to the identity. In that case, sorry, this is a P. So when we take C equal to the identity, P is bounded from L2 into the domain of A. So we have a smoothing operator. This is what is written here, and what I have used in some paper in 2006. So in place of taking positive fractional power, we can take negative fractional power. So it means that we take a norm which is even weaker than L2, and in that case, what we do, we increase the smoothness property of the operator of the solution to the Riccati equation. And this can be, it's a completely different way. This can be used to prove the stabilizability in the 3D case. But we can take even C weaker. We can take C of finite rank, or C equal to 0. Okay, so C of finite rank corresponds to this type of operator. For example, we can choose C as being the projection onto the unstable space and take this functional. So in that case, of course, we control only the part corresponding to the projected system. And you can, in that case, replace the state equation by the projected equation. It's the same. You can solve the problem in the same way. And if you take C equal to 0, it means that you do not put this term. You just look at minimize the control of U. Of course, under the condition that you still have Z in L2. And this is what we do when we take the feedback that I have given before. Okay. So the feedback which is given by this Riccati equation corresponds to C equal to 0, because here you see that the term corresponding to C star C is not present. It means that we take C equal to 0, so it's a completely different way. And so C equal to 0, you look for the control of minimal norm. Okay. So the advantage of that is that we have to look at a Riccati equation of finite dimension, which is nice from the numerical viewpoint. And it is written what I have explained before here. For the approximation, we need a very accurate computation of an unstable eigenvalue, but the approximation is done only at that level. And now, a few words about the feedback stabilization of the Navier-Stokes equation. So now I just present the result in the case that I use the projected system. So I look at this equation. Now, since I would like to have some decay corresponding to minus omega, I made a change of variable and I introduce minus omega z, and because of that I have to introduce this weight in the nonlinear term. And I rewrite this equation as a system of two different equations, one for the projection on the unstable space, and the other one corresponds to the projection onto the stable part. And of course, I have a coupling between both because I need this quantity and also that one in the nonlinear term here. So now I choose U, as explained before, constructed only with a finite dimensional part. And so in that case, what I have to solve? I have to solve this equation here, in which U will depend only on ZU. This is the equation. So this is the equation in feedback form. So we have to solve first this equation. Next, when we know ZU, we replace ZU into the equation for ZS. It is given there, but now the control depends only on ZU. But of course, the two systems are coupled because the F here correspond to the nonlinear term, and so when we solve the nonlinear equation, we have to make the coupling between these two systems. Okay, now I have to explain what we can do about the space S, F, and C. I have said I take C equal to 0. So in this picture, C is fixed, and I have to explain what is S and F. So if I have only Dirichlet condition, in that case, I can make the following choice. I can take S is the space of L2 function with values in H1. I use here the notation V to say that the divergence is also 0, and L infinity with values in L2. And the space of initial condition is L2 plus some divergence condition. In that case, the nonlinear term, which is written there is a mistake here because the exponential is missing. In that case, the nonlinear term belongs to L2 with values in H minus 1, or precisely the dual of this space. I take the divergence condition in it. Okay, and I have to put here the projection, otherwise this is H minus 1 and not B minus 1. Sorry for that. So in that case, I can solve this system, but I can also choose another space here, a space of more regular function. So I can choose initial data in H epsilon for epsilon positive, not necessarily 0. The previous case corresponds to epsilon equal to 0. So if I choose more regular data, I can change the space of solution in this way and prove that the nonlinear term belongs to that space. It means in a space a little bit more regular than H minus 1 in order to get a nice property for the solution. And so the result is the following one. I can choose either epsilon equal to 0 or greater than 0. So in that case, if the initial data is not too large, we can prove that the nonlinear system with the feedback law coming from the linear study is stable in the sense that we obtain a solution in that space. And because we have some bound on exponential omega t z, we obtain the following decay. So now, in the case of mixed boundary condition, I cannot do the same. More precisely, I cannot take epsilon equal to 0. Why? Because this term is no longer in that space because of the Neumann condition. If I make an integration by part here, contrarily to the case when I have only Dirichlet condition, I have this term on the boundary, and because of that, I cannot say that I can identify this term with an element in the dual of. So I cannot close the loop, and so because of that, I have to introduce things which are a little bit more complicated. So first, I have to take initial data little bit more regular than L2. So I have to take some epsilon. For the F, this is nice. It's exactly as previously. But for the state of solution, I have to decompose the state into two parts. The part coming from the control, which is given there, plus another part, which seems to be a little bit strange, but it corresponds to the maximal regularity result we can obtain for the corresponding parabolic equation when the right-hand side is here. So I do not give the details here, but Yeah, but the closed loop system now has a solution in a space corresponding to this norm, and we have exponential decay in this norm.